Good morning. Today we're going to give you some rules for adding and subtracting integers. So these are some quick ways to remember if we're a little bit confused if the answer is going to be positive or negative. So let's look at rule number 1. When we're adding integers, if we have a positive number added to another positive number, it's going to be always positive. And that's the same as just adding two numbers together. We've been doing that for the last 6 or 7 years in school. So rule number 2, we're looking at a positive number added to a negative number. So I like to think of temperature when I'm thinking of this one. So it depends which is greater. So in this case, the answer is going to be negative because the negative number right here is bigger. So if it was -3 outside and it warmed up by 1 degree, or if it was 1 degree outside and it dropped by 3 degrees, the answer is going to be in the negative. It's going to be -2 degrees outside. So it depends which one is greater. Right there, it is negative. And the next question, if you look, it depends which one is greater as well. But this one is greater. So the answer is going to be positive. So we have a positive 3-degree temperature outside. It drops by 1 degree. It's still +2. This answer will be positive. Now, if you're thinking in the case of adding two negatives together, we worked a lot with the counters last week. So if we are talking about adding one red counter and then 3 more red counters, our red counters were negative. So we have 1 degree outside, and then you add 3 more negative degrees, so we're at -1, and then you add 3 more degrees down, we're at -4. Anytime you add two negatives together, the answer is going to always be negative. So adding should be okay. We practiced this a lot this week, but what we need to work on right now is subtracting. Subtracting is a little bit more confusing as the rules are not as clear cut. So we will be practicing this week, so January 13th week. But just to give you the quick rules for the grade 8s that have already done this last year and the grade 7s to get a good start on it is rules for subtracting integers. So let's look. If you're adding a positive, if you're subtracting a +1 minus a +3, or +3 minus a +1, it depends. Because if your first number is bigger, like in this one, you're really just doing 3 minus 1. And 3 minus 1 is going to give you 2. So it's a positive answer. But in the first one, your second number is bigger. So you're starting +1 and you're taking away 3. So if your second number is bigger in your question, the answer is going to be negative. If your first number is bigger, your answer is going to be positive, and it's always going to work that way. So remember, make sure, do you have more negatives? Do you have more positives? Is your second number bigger, or is your first number bigger? These are always things to check out. In the second rule, when the negative sign and the positive sign are next to each other, this is what we're going to be learning this week. You have a negative sign and a positive sign next to each other. You're not quite sure if it's negative or positive. Do I add them or do I subtract them? Think of this, and it's not a good rule in life, but the negative always wins. So when we're talking about integers, the negative sign always wins. So if the negative sign and the positive sign are fighting, just imagine that the negative takes over and it's a -3. So you have -1 and then you subtract another 3. So when the negative sign and positive sign are next to each other, the negative sign always wins, making this question now read -1 minus another 3, or -1 take away another -3, and my answer is going to be -4. Okay, so same thing, we're going to look at number 3. There's a rule when two negative signs are next to each other. When there are two negative signs next to each other, it's like taking away a negative sign. So subtracting the negative sign away. So the rule here is when there's two negative signs, it's like you're taking them away and they're turning into a positive. I also have a little story about, two wrongs make a right. Two negatives make a positive. When you're talking in English and you say, I don't not care, it's two negatives and you really mean a positive statement. You really mean I care. So two negative signs, all you need to remember, makes a positive. So if you're not quite sure what to do there, just eliminate both the negative signs, turn it into a positive. I like because the two negative signs each have a line. So take one, take the other, and make a positive sign. So now, making it's a positive sign, this question now reads 1 degree plus another 3 degrees. So I'm talking about an answer of 4 plus 4. Okay, so up here, a negative and a positive. The negative always wins. Down here, two negatives turns into a positive. And the last rule here, instead of starting with a positive one, I'm starting with a negative one, but I see I have two negatives together, so it's like I'm subtracting the negatives, so minus another -3. I am changing that into a positive. I have -1 degree plus 3 degrees, so it now reads -1 plus 3. So if I jump up 3 degrees, I am now into the positives. I'm into +2. So just a little recap on this as well. Up here, when you're subtracting positive numbers, just make sure you look at if the first number is bigger or the second number is bigger. Down here, negative and positive, the negative sign always wins in a fight. When you have two negative signs together, turns into a positive. Two negative signs together turns into a positive. And this week, we are going to be practicing this with manips, with our games, with our integral game. We are also going to work in a couple pages in our workbooks, and by the end of this week, our goal is to be able to add and subtract integers without even thinking about them, because the grade 8s are moving on to multiplying and dividing. Thank you, and good luck with this week.